stand like this.
I,
Michael Wee,
solemnly
solemnly swear
that the evidence
that the evidence
I shall give to the court
I shall give to the court
in this case
shall be the truth,
the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Yes. Yes. Thank you for coming. Do I pronounce your name Wee or Y?
We.
Wee. Well, thank you for coming. There's water there for you if you want it. If you need a break at any point, just let me know and we'll see what we can do, all right?
Sure, thanks.
We're going to start with the procedure where your statement is going to be summarized rather than having to go through the entirety of it. You follow. That summary is going to be given by Mr. Bissessar, who sits on the end of the row there. Listen carefully to it. If you disagree with anything, let us know once we get to the end, all right? And then you'll be asked some questions by Mr. Maharaj and other counsel who have an interest. All right? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Bissessar.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Wee, do you recall signing a witness statement dated 16th August 2022?
Yes.
And the contents of that witness statement, are they true and correct?
Yes.
I will now summarize your witness statement, which is at WB 1271. While I'm doing so, on the screen, a schematic representation of Sealine 36 and the two risers at berths 5 and 6 will be displayed. Sealine 36 was out of service as its risers at berths 5 and 6 had clamped leaks. To return Sealine 36 to service, the approach undertaken was to first repair Sealine 36 between pile bent 80 and berth 5, and that was done in November 2020, and to then repair the section between berths 5 and 6. The scope of works for the works at berths 5 and 6 were prepared by Paria, and then a tender package for the project was submitted to registered vendors of Paria, which included LMCS Limited.
I think this doesn't really represent what the first repair was. There was a second loop. The riser that fixed at 5 first, I mentioned in 2020, would be a separate loop, not this loop, okay?
Thank you, Mr. Wee. This is just merely for illustration purposes.
Yeah.
It's not related to specifically what we are summarizing. The scope of works for the works at berths 5 and 6 were prepared by Paria, and then a tender package for the project was submitted to registered vendors of Paria, which included LMCS Limited, LMCS for short. LMCS was the only bidder that was technically compliant with all of the requirements for the contract, and Paria's Management Tenders Committee approved the award of the contract for the repairs and refurbishment works at berths 5 and 6 to LMCS, and that was on 27th May 2021. A purchase order was issued, and apart from the terms and conditions contained in the invitation to bid, the works are also governed by Paria's General Conditions of Contract dated 10th May 2021. LMCS had previously successfully completed a similar subsea repair job at berth number 5. Its performance on that job had been assessed by Paria as either very good or excellent in various categories. After this project commenced in June 2021, there was an accident at the offshore services dock resulting in an injury to an LMCS worker. OSHA issued a prohibition notice suspending all works on the Sealine number 36. works resumed in January 2022 after OSHA lifted the prohibition notice upon being satisfied that Paria satisfied the requirements for a safe resumption of works. There was a meeting on 24th February 2022 between Paria and LMCS representatives where the planned schedule of works for Friday 25th February 2022 and the weekend were outlined and discussed. Mr. Wee, yourself, lists the specific tasks which were to be completed and the sequence of the said tasks to be completed from Friday 25th February 2022 up until the completion of the works. Notably, according to you, Mr. Wee, at paragraph 56 of your witness statement, the plugs were not to be removed from within the hyperbaric habitat. Rather, they were to be removed from the top side after the habitat had been removed. Permits to work were issued on 25th February 2022. The main permit to work was PTW 9320 for various maintenance works. Attached to that PTW was a revised method statement dated 4th January 2022 and a job safety analysis dated 10th December 2021. LMCS's method statements, JHA's, risk assessments, and dive plan documents were all reviewed and accepted by Paria. The revised method statement dated 4th January 2022 was subject to Paria's permit to work system. LMCS did not identify drowning, suffocating in the pipeline as credible scenarios in its documents. In its dive plan, it stated that the likelihood of entrapment or entanglement in the pipeline was no. Paria accepted this assessment because no one could enter the pipeline while the mechanical and inflatable plugs, collectively known as the migration barrier, were in place. The configuration of the work area in the pipeline was such that the top of the riser would pass the waist of the divers standing in the chamber, and it was not credible or reasonable to expect that any of the divers would enter the pipeline voluntarily. There was no job or task described in PTW 9320 for the removal of either the mechanical plug or the inflatable plug. The removal of the plugs by LMCS without express approval by way of permit to work would have constituted a serious breach of Paria's PTW's procedure and constitute work which was not authorized. The removal of the plugs would have caused a dangerous disturbance of the atmospheric conditions inside the chamber and the differential pressure between inside the pipeline and inside the chamber. This would have allowed the hydrocarbon fumes from the pipeline to enter the chamber, which would have contaminated the breathing air in the chamber and would have created a combustible environment and would have created as well a fire hazard. In your witness statement, you say that the removal of the plugs by LMCS opened the differential pressure between the pipeline and the chamber, which is likely to have caused a powerful and immediate suction effect, which pulled and entrapped the divers inside the pipeline and ultimately caused the deaths of 4 of them. You were a member of Paria's incident command team, and you gave in your witness statement an account of the response of that team to the incident. In your witness statement, you say that at 6 p.m., this is on Friday, the 25th of February, 2022, the IMT, that's the incident command team, or the incident management team, got information that Christopher Boudram was rescued. The IMT then made a decision that the remaining divers were in the pipeline, and the IMT decided that it was critical to ascertain the conditions in the pipeline for any rescue efforts to be safely planned and executed. In your witness statement, you say that based on that decision at 6:10 p.m., the IMT took steps to source cameras to provide internal visuals of the pipeline. You say that it first made efforts to obtain a borescope, but this could not be used because the borescope light intensity was inadequate. In your witness statement, you say that the IMT made efforts to obtain a push-rod camera, which was used at about midnight to conduct an inspection of the pipeline, but encountered an obstruction in the horizontal section. You say that at 10 p.m., the IMT had a telephone call with Christopher Boudram. He is the survivor. At around 10:50 p.m., you say in your witness statement that you made arrangements to obtain a pipeline crawler. That crawler also encountered an obstruction in the horizontal section of the pipeline. You then discussed the works of the IMT and the ICT, and you say that during the meetings and discussions of the ICT, several search and rescue options were discussed, and you identified 4 of them. Firstly, open water search. This was immediately after the incident. Secondly, a dive rescue into the pipeline and dry hyperbaric chamber. And you say that this, once the first diver was recovered, and it was therefore known that the divers were in the pipeline. Thirdly, a confined space rescue in the pipeline in a dry environment. And you say that seawater had to be pumped out of the line prior to this rescue effort. And finally, fourthly, cutting of the pipeline. You say that, however, neither the Coast Guard or the expert diving companies or the rescue company which Paria contacted could be persuaded to enter the pipeline to conduct a rescue. You say that, further, the cutting of the pipeline was deemed too inefficient and too risky due to the estimated time it would take to plan and execute the works. So can you please stay where you are, as Mr. Miraj has several questions for you following any statements from the Commission.
Good morning, Mr. Good morning.
Good morning to you too, sir.
I just want to ask you some questions. I'm sure you'll be able to assist us.
1 second.
Microphone.
Sorry, I just want to ask you a few questions because I'm sure you'll be able to assist us in the task which the commissioners have to decide. You said in your witness statement that you are a member of the Incident Command Team of Paria. Could you explain to us what is the duty, what is the duty and function of that team? Just a summary of it.
Okay. The Incident Command Team is a team responsible for the management of any major incidents on the site or emergencies. Right? It's headed by the Incident Commander, and other functional people in the group would be logistics coordinator, which would be me. You would have someone for the site, right? And any other supporting that would require. So it's basically a management team that comes together to manage the incident.
Okay, and on the 25th of February, 2022, when this accident occurred, you were a functioning member of that team. Am I correct?
Yes.
And according to your witness statement, at about 3:13 p.m. on that date, you first heard of the accident.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, I want to deal first with the rescue aspect of your statement, okay? It was mentioned a short while ago that you got information that Christopher Boudram was rescued, and am I correct, you got that information at around 6 p.m. on the 25th of February?
That is correct.
Correct. Would I be correct to say that prior to the rescue of Christopher Boudram, the efforts of Paria to rescue was constituted mainly searching in the open waters for the divers?
Based on the information provided by LMCS, Paria focused on sea and search. Let me explain a little bit. Under the contract, LMCS, as our independent contractor, expert contractor, is required to provide an emergency rescue plan and the respective people to execute the emergency plan. This being a job of diving, Paria doesn't have divers, neither the competency with diving in this instance. So that would have relied on the contractor to provide that. At the time of the incident, the information reaching to the IMT was limited, only that it was reported by Mr. Andrew Farah that an incident occurred around 2:45. Subsequent to that, he put on his gear and entered the water, and about 15 minutes later, thereafter, he reported that in the chamber there were no divers, though it was dry. That information related back to the IM. There was a report back to the incident command team that an incident occurred in the chamber, and Paria, on its own accord, started sea search because that is what they're capable of. We have boats, we have tugs, and we were able to search the open water, while LMCS would have been responsible for the execution of their rescue plan within the chamber.
Okay, I'll come later to about responsibility. I'm just trying to get the facts from you.
Yeah.
It is therefore correct that prior to the rescue of Christopher Boudram, Paria's rescue efforts were confined to searching the open waters.
Correct.
Correct. And in fairness to you, contacting some of the agencies like the Coast Guard and the Fire Service.
Yes.
Correct? Before you, well, put it this way, I want to ask you. So after Paria and the incident command team found out that Christopher Boudram was rescued, according to your statement, you all started to make efforts to get cameras, crawlers, boroscope, and etc., to get information of what was in the pipeline, the condition in the pipeline.
Yes.
And according to your statement, you would have known that Christopher Boudram was rescued. He was taken to the San Fernando Hospital, right?
Yes.
And it was not until about 10 p.m. that the incident command team had a virtual meeting with him.
That is correct.
Correct. So during the period 6 p.m. to 10 p.m., the efforts that Paria made to assist in rescuing was purely trying to get diving teams to go into the pipeline and getting cameras to see what was in the pipeline.
Okay. Primary with respect to the assisting LMCS with a dive rescue, if they had a plan to do that, right?
Could you give us an explanation that you are in the incident command team, divers were missing, and you would have got that information at about 3 p.m. Before Christopher Boudram was rescued, you all were doing rescue in the open waters. You knew that at 6 o'clock he was rescued. You continued to try to find out what information you could get from what is inside the pipeline, the conditions of the pipeline, and not until 10 o'clock you decided to talk to Boudram, who would have had first-hand information about what was in the pipeline.
Okay, let's put this in context. At 6 o'clock, Mr. Budram was pulled from the pipeline. Mr. Budram came out from the pipeline in a condition that the first thing you would try to do was to ensure that his life is safe. Had we not done that, Christopher Budram may not have been here today. What we did a quick medical check on the guy, on Mr. Budram. For example, he came up with bodily injuries. He had, I don't know what oil on his throat. He was fully covered in oil. And the primary responsibility would have to be ensuring that he is properly taken care of before questioning him on every condition inside the pipeline, right? Subsequent to that, he was moved to the hospital. At the hospital, because of the restrictions of COVID, we were unable to get to him, to get information from him. I understand from the IMT members, a call needed to make within the medical fraternity high up to get information to at least get a call to him, and that was successful at 10 o'clock. Additionally, at the time to talk to him was limited. The doctor said you wasn't given much time to talk to him. But also, too, what you need to understand, too, is that the information from Budram is not only verbal. When Mr. Budram is pulled out from the chamber, there's also nonverbal information that one can get. For example, he was covered in oil. He had injuries, internal injuries, and both disoriented.
Mr. Y, according to the evidence we have so far from the record, did Paria make any effort to have a doctor to meet Mr. Budram when he was rescued? Was a doctor there?
I don't know.
No. Was a decompression unit available for him to go in when he was rescued? At the scene? At the place of rescue?
At the place of rescue, the requirement for any hyperbaric chamber would have been the supply of LMCS, right? Parias, again, is not in the diving business, right? But Paria did assist in trying to get a hyperbaric chamber in the event that he required the use of a hyperbaric chamber.
So I just wanted clear from you. You were taking the position, Paria was taking the position, since in your view it was LMCS responsibility, you were not taking steps to have a DMO there?
Not at all.
Did you take any steps or any action to have a...
Specifically for me, I did not take any actions
are you
calling a DMO.
Well, you were in the IMT.
Correct.
Did the IMT take any steps?
I would not know.
You would not know.
But we had called in all the other agencies, the fire services, whoever, Coast Guard. I'm not so sure if we actually called a DMO.
Mr. Budram told us that when he went to the hospital, he was conscious, he was talking, he talked to his wife, he talked to the nurses. Would you doubt that?
No, I don't doubt that.
You don't doubt that. Now, if he was in that condition, would you agree with me that the IMT and you would have got important information from him as to what was the condition in the pipeline?
If we could have spoken to him, yes.
Did you make any effort to find out whether you could have spoken to him?
Me personally or the IMT?
You.
No, I didn't make personal efforts to call him because I don't have his contact numbers. I don't know the numbers for the hospital.
But you were in the IMT.
Correct.
What the IMT did that evening, did you have records of it?
Yes, there should be records.
So there are minutes of what happened at that meeting?
There would be the IMT would log, the IMT logs what a live log of what's occurred.
From what you know, have you seen any record of the IMT making any effort to talk to Mr. Budram before 10 o'clock that evening?
From what I know, we were attempting to talk to him, but we only got through at 10 o'clock.
So when so what, you only got through what, on the telephone or what?
On the telephone.
So when did you attempt to talk to him?
From as early as possible, I guess. From
Do you
as early
know
as possible.
or you assume?
I assume,
You assume.
because that would be the natural response.
Well, from 6 o'clock to 10 o'clock, 4 hours, did you consider it was urgent to be able to get this information? Because according
Yes.
to your statement, that was important for you all to make a decision as what to do to rescue.
Right. Personally, I did not go to the hospital, but I understood that we sent someone to the hospital in an event of.
And who was that?
I don't recall his name.
Do you have a record of the person's name?
We'll have to talk to the HSE lead on the team.
Mr. Y, as a senior officer of Paria, would you not have thought at the time, and a member of the incident command team, would you not have thought at that time that you could have had an official of Paria accompany Mr. Budram in the ambulance to get vital information that you were looking for from cameras and boroscope and etc.?
Okay.
At the time, did you think of that?
The incident command team structure has different responsibilities for the individuals.
I'm sorry?
The incident command team comprises different members who have different responsibilities. At the time of the incident, when Christopher Budram is retrieved, I would have then started to focus on getting the, as I said, the cameras and stuff to get the information in line as part of the logistics lead. The part of the stabilization and transport of Mr. Budram would have fallen on another member of the team.
Who is that member?
That would be Randy Archibald.
Well, as a member of the incident command team, you're here to help us.
Yeah.
Would you agree that if someone from Paria or a member of the incident command team had accompanied Mr. Budram, they could have got information from Mr. Budram of the matters you all were making attempts to get from the cameras and the boroscope and etc.?
No. Mr. Budram, we would not know the condition of Mr. Budram or the information or the condition of Mr. Budram at that time. Right? As I said before, it was trying to stabilize Mr. Budram. Right? Also to visual information from Mr. Budram. The pipeline is dark, full of oil. Mr. Budram would not give any visual information. But Paria were making attempts to communicate with Mr. Budram to understand what information he could provide for the internal of the line.
Okay. Am I correct in saying that from 6 o'clock to 10 o'clock and continuing, but let's take from 6 to 10.
Yeah.
The purpose, the IMT, was trying to get the cameras and to get information to see what was the condition inside the pipeline in order to determine what rescue plan to devise.
To assist with the rescue plan to devise, yes.
And would you agree with me that Mr. Budram was inside that pipeline? You would have known then that after he was rescued from the pipeline, from inside the pipeline. Am I correct?
Yes.
So the information which the IMT wanted to have was information which Mr. Budram could have given to you and the IMT. Am I correct?
Yes, and we got that around 10 o'clock.
Yes. You gave evidence of a conversation the IMT had with Mr. Budram.
Yes.
And the the information you gave in your witness statement is accurate?
To the best of my recollection, yes.
Is accurate. I want to read what you said in your affidavit about, about what the information you had with Mr. Boudram. The conversation. That conversation is at, I wonder if the witness can be shown his witness statement. At paragraph 106. Page 1290. Okay, you found it, Mr. Wei?
Yes, sir.
He said at around 10 p.m., the IMT and the names there were on call with the rescue diver, Christopher Boudram, who provided his recollection of the events within the pipeline. He stated that on his way out of the pipeline, he crossed over blacks who was already gone. He was assisting Kaz, who had a broken leg, and he encountered an air pocket. They continued on the way out, but lost a diver along the way. He encountered another air pocket and then lost Kaz. He recalled that he felt and counted 2 pipe wells before he reached the elbow. As he was coming up with Faizi behind him, Faizi told him he could not make it and to leave him behind. Do you said this was accurate of the conversation that you had with him.
My recollection of the conversation, yes.
Yes. Do you see anything here of they asking him about the condition in the pipeline, those conditions, what you wanted to know?
He reported that there was a pocket. Remember, I told you that the time was limited, and he wanted to recount with respect to what conditions the pipeline, the people in the pipeline, and yes, he provided some information on the condition of the line.
But you wanted to know about the air pocket? You wanted to know whether there was any obstruction. In other words, you wanted to know, the IMT wanted to know whether someone could have gone into the pipeline to rescue the divers. So you wanted to know what was preventing, if anything was preventing persons to go into the pipeline.
This communication was to establish who would have been alive in the pipeline and what else was in the pipeline.
The question I'm asking you is that would you agree with me that you could have got information from Mr. Boudram as to whether on his way out of the pipeline there was any obstruction to prevent any diver from going into the pipeline to rescue the men?
Repeat the question, please.
Would you agree with me that the information you could have got from Mr. Boudram was to find out whether there was any obstruction in the pipeline to prevent any divers from going into the pipeline to rescue the men?
I would say no, because I would not know what Boudram would have said or what he would have encountered.
But were you interested to find out as a member of the incident command team?
Of course, that's why we got in touch with him.
But if you were interested to find out, you had Mr. Boudram, who could have given you first-hand information, the best evidence, and you spent hours trying to get cameras to go in to find out what you could have got from Mr. Boudram.
Okay, remember I mentioned to you when we finally got through to Mr. Budram, Mr. Budram started to recount the events, the personnel inside, and then we were informed by the person on the other side that he cannot speak much longer.
But would you agree with me that you did not take any steps, you or the IMT did not take any steps
I disagree
to
with you.
interview Mr. Budram before 10 o'clock?
I disagree with you.
What steps you took?
We said, I earlier said that we had someone from the HSC team.
But you cannot tell us who is that person. Did that person report to the IMT?
That person reported into the HSC team who would have provided that information.
Mr. Y, as a member of the IMT, were you interested in taking steps to rescue Mr. Budram?
Of course,
According to your statement, it was important for the IMT to make a decision to rescue, to find out what was the condition in the pipeline in order to determine what action it will take. Because according to your statement, Mr. Y, there were several divers that you all contacted for the purpose of going into the pipeline. Am I not correct?
yes.
Right. So here it is. You have a man who just came out of the pipeline. He could give you all that information, right? Why it is that I haven't seen any evidence that Paria or the IMT got someone to go with him to the hospital to get information whilst he was at the hospital to get information. I'm saying all this thing for you to understand my question. Could you assist us?
Mr. Chairman, if I may object, I'm sorry, but this is in order to assist. Mr. Ramesh Lawrence Maraja said he hasn't seen any evidence that anyone from Paria was there. At least that's what I understand him to be saying. Perhaps he might want to consider, before pursuing the question, considering the statement of Mr. Paul Yearwood and paragraph 33 of that statement. I don't want to identify what that evidence is at this stage because the witness is giving evidence.
What Paul Yearwood at paragraph 33 says.
Yes. And of course, I understand that with the statements from Kenson are yet to come.
Yes. Yes. At paragraph 33, at paragraph 33, it said of Mr. Paul Yearwood's statement, it says that at the time he indicated he was in the San Fernando at 9:53 p.m., he indicated he was at the that Mr. Sham Balkisoon said that he was in the San Fernando General Hospital with Mr. Budram. A person who identified himself as Budram was put on the line and spoke to Mr. Mustaq Mohammed. What I'm saying, I'm not disputing that someone spoke to him. What I'm disputing, I have not seen any evidence so far that anyone tried to find out from Mr. Budram what was the condition of the pipeline when he came out.
Yes, I think if the purpose of your question is to try and establish what was said as opposed to when it was said, then I think you need to make that clear.
Yes.
If you're suggesting that there was no effort, as I understand you to be suggesting, there was no effort made to contact Mr. Budram at all for the better part of 4 hours, then I think that's already been answered. He's made it clear that he says there were efforts being made. Whether that's borne out, we'll see. But
yes.
For the moment, that's what his evidence is.
Yes.
And I think we don't need to pursue that any further. But if you're looking to establish precisely what is said, that is a different matter.
Yeah.
And I should certainly, for my part, be interested in knowing what it was that he said.
Mr.
What
Wise.
might be particularly useful, forgive me, I think what might be particularly useful is to know whether anyone wrote any of this down.
Yeah, yeah. In respect of what this, what's the name of it? In respect of Mr. Sham Balkisoon conversation allegedly made with Mr. Christopher Boudram, do you know whether that was written down and that there was any written record of that?
I would know, because that would be Sham Balkisoon. I would not have interfaced with Sham directly.
But you would agree with me that Mr. Boudram could have given you information as to whether there was any obstruction in the pipeline to prevent any rescue being done.
Mr. Boudram provided that information physically, that there was oil in the line. He provided information that there's an air pocket. He provided information that the men were in the line, right? He provided, and the rest would have been deduced from that the divers would have had their tanks off of them, and everything, the chamber information from FARA reflected that the chamber was empty, meaning that all the tools and the gear was inside.
Based on what you have told me, Mr. Boudram did not say that there was any obstruction in the pipeline to prevent a diver from going into the pipeline.
Based on my statement here, it did not say that.
No.
May I ask, just so that I understand it, did you keep a contemporaneous note of what he was telling you?
No.
Did anyone, as far as you know, keep a contemporaneous note of what he was saying at 10 o'clock?
That would have been recorded by the IMT.
Well, do you know that that was recorded by the IMT in a separate note?
Yes.
Does somebody have it?
I don't know if it was submitted here.
Well, let me be clear. I don't claim to have read every single piece of paper in the 20,000 that's been provided. And it may be that someone can enlighten us in due course as to whether there was such a separate note kept or whether it was recorded in the IMT, and I look forward to seeing it if it was. All right? But you, at any rate, did not keep a note.
Yes, specific for me, I did not keep a note.
And just to that end, did you, when you made your statement, which I think you made on the 16th of August of this year, so many months after the event, did you have the IMT notes with you when you made that statement?
At times, forgetting specific time, maybe, yes.
And say that again, please.
The notes basically would have taken when I needed a specific time.
Right.
For example, the time Christopher Boudram would have been.
So you'd have used those notes, such as they might have been, to assist you in recording the sequence of events and the times. Would that be fair?
In a way, yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And in your witness statement, you would have put in your witness statement all the matters you considered important relating to the rescue of Mr. Boudram.
Yes.
Yes. Now, at paragraph 102 of your witness statement, after it was found out that Mr. Boudram was rescued within the pipeline, you stated at paragraph 102, having heard that Mr. Boudram said that the remaining divers were trapped in the pipeline, it was critical for the IMT to ascertain the conditions within the pipeline for any rescue effort to be properly planned and safely executed. That is correct?
Yeah.
And then what the IMT did was that at paragraph 107, at around 10:50 p.m., a company was contacted to provide a crawler with a camera. Correct?
Yes.
And what was that purpose? What that was to achieve?
to enter any pipeline, to establish, to identify the conditions inside the pipeline.
Well, to identify whether there is any obstruction. Because at paragraph 107 you said, I contacted HHSL Systems Limited for the mobilization of a pipeline crawler with camera. HHSL reported that within the riser of boat number 6, they were able to descend the riser unobstructed, and the horizontal scuba tank was obstructing the pipeline crawler from going further. Correct?
Yes?
So would I be correct in saying that the IMT wanted to know through the crawler and the boroscope whether there was any obstruction in the pipeline?
Yes?
Yes. And the attempts were made by the IMT throughout that night until until 3 p.m. the next morning, in trying to get the crawler and getting the footage in order to determine whether there was any obstruction in the pipeline.
Not only obstruction, but the conditions inside the pipeline.
What condition?
Other
Apart
risk,
from obstruction?
additional risk that is in the pipeline.
Like what?
We were unaware of what caused the incident, right? At this time, we knew it was a Delta P incident. However, we did not know if the incident would have created any secondary condition, which another Delta P incident could have occurred.
Another Delta P?
Yes, or another Delta P incident could have occurred, or what could disrupt the conditions in the line that would have affected the air pockets.
So you formed an opinion, or the IMT formed an opinion there could be another Delta P?
At this stage here, we do not know, so we have to consider different scenarios.
So the crawler photograph would have assisted you to find out whether another Delta P would have occurred?
It would provide information that could have answered the questions or provide clarity on where the items
could you
were.
assist us? How would that have been able to assist to determine if another Delta P could have occurred?
The camera would have been able to go into the line if it was able to go in freely to 100 to around, I think it was about 600 plus feet the camera could have gone in. It would have established the conditions inside the line, because at that stage we understood that the plug was removed, was attempted to be removed, and it could have been stuck somewhere in the line. You don't know where, you don't know berth 5 was closed, the pressures are different. So the conditions, we are unaware of the conditions. And the crawler would allow you to see, would allow you to pick up information.
Well,
Just a moment. I understand that. Of course, any camera equipment into the pipe will give you information. But you haven't really answered the question that Mr. Maharaj was asking, which was, how would that crawler help you identify if there was a possibility of a second Delta P?
Okay. It could establish if the plug was deflated or inflated, or still inflated. Had it been inflated, you could have had a different pressure on the berth 5 side and the berth 6 side. If it was deflated, it would have said that then the pressures on both sides would be equal, and you can do a different strategy for options. The plug itself would have created, if it blocked the line, one side would have a different pressure and the next side would have a different pressure.
Yes, I follow that. But of all things that were in that pipeline, the first thing that got sucked in, if it got sucked in, would have been the plug.
Yes.
So that would be the furthest thing away from all the other things that were in the pipe, right?
Yes.
So by now you knew that the men were in the pipeline,
Correct.
You presumably assumed, if not known, that the tanks were in the pipeline
Yes.
and any other equipment that might have been in that hyperbaric chamber. Yeah?
Yes.
So how was your crawler going to go past all of those things to a plug that would have been the furthest thing away, and how would that have assisted you in knowing whether there was the possibility of a second delta P by identifying the plug was inflated or not? How would it be possible?
Because we don't know.
Who's we? Don't know.
We, the team,
Don't know what?
the conditions inside the pipeline.
No.
Lower
I
the
follow that.
location.
I don't want to go over that Mr. Maharaj was doing that. I just need to understand. Forgive me, Mr. Way. I don't understand. The question that was asked of you was whether or not this particular piece of equipment, which I'm assuming has a camera on the end of it,
Yeah.
is able to identify whether there was a possibility of a secondary delta P. And your answer to that was, well, we would want to look at the plug, whether it was inflated or deflated. I get that.
Right.
I just don't understand how you could have got to the plug without getting to the people first.
And that is why we would have gone from Berth 5 late in the night.
Why you would have what, sorry?
That's why the camera would have come in from Berth 5, attempted to go in from Berth 5 from the other side to inspect.
Is that
So
what
the-
happened?
The intention was to establish the condition inside the line. You had access from Berth 6, and you had access from Berth 5.
No, I follow that. So when you sent in the camera, this crawler,
Right.
which end did it go in?
It went in on the Berth 6 first,
Right.
because at that time, that
Did it
was
go-
the accessible area.
Sorry.
At that time, that was the accessible area.
Yeah. There came a time, didn't there, when you opened the seal at the other end?
Yes.
Had there been a delta P differential between the pressure one side of that seal and a different pressure the other side of the seal, if you opened that cap, would that have caused a problem?
That could have caused a problem.
Yeah, so that was a risk as well.
Correct.
Yes. Of course, the men were still in the pipe when you were sending in this crawler.
Right. So let me just step back a bit.
Wait, no, just before you go on.
So I could
please.
answer that question
No,
for you.
well, you have. You told me they were still the other side. So I just want to, I need to be clear about this because I think it's quite important. If you send the camera at the other end, which you told me you did, when was that?
That would have, you have to refer to my statement.
Yeah, please do. It's there for your use, yes. Perhaps someone can guide you as to which paragraph that might have been in.
Mo- 108.
Yes?
HSL was subsequently instructed to relocate the Berth 5 riser to conduct a pipeline internal inspection.
Right.
HSL reported that oil was encountered at the bottom of the riser, which covered the crawler and cameras, so they could not continue.
What time was that, please?
That would have been somewhere around 5 o'clock in the morning,
5 in the morning.
if I recall.
Well, I don't want you to guess. If you can't recall now.
No, it would have been after the inspection at 6, and then you went on to 5. So it would be somewhere around 5 o'clock
5 o'clock in the morning,
on the Saturday.
on Saturday morning.
Yeah.
All right, yes. So that I understand as well, when that was done, and the crawler sent in, what you came across was oil.
Correct.
And couldn't see
At the
anything.
bottom of the pipe.
Yes, and couldn't see anything.
Correct.
And so that was abandoned, presumably.
That was abandoned, but it did provide information,
Well, provided the information there was oil at the bottom of the pipe.
and that the plug was sealing the line.
Was what?
And the plug was sealing the line
Sealing the line.
because one level on 6 was full of water,
Right.
and on 5 was just oil at the bottom of the line.
Right. Okay, thank you very much.
But Mr. Why, are you aware that at around 10 p.m., the topside riser was above water?
The topside riser at 10 p.m. was
At
above
Berth
water.
6.
Yes,
That was above water.
correct?
So the camera went in from above water?
At 6,
Yes.
yes.
So both sides of the riser were above water?
Both sides of the riser,
Were above water at around 10 p.m.?
both, explain that, I had not seen
Both
what you're telling me.
risers were above water?
Water, sea level,
Yes,
you right? Yes?
yes.
I am talking about the level inside the pipeline. Sorry if I didn't make myself clear. The level of water in Berth 6 was higher than the level of oil at Berth 5.
At 10 o'clock at 10 o'clock?
At
How do you
10
know that?
Okay. Well, I have to make an assumption here.
Make an assumption.
That nothing occurred, that the plug did not move between 10 to 5 o'clock in the morning.
Do you consider yourself an expert in Delta P?
No.
Do you consider someone sufficient to give an opinion on Delta P?
In this instance here, with the YouTube,
So you consider yourself sufficiently experienced and have the expertise to give an opinion on Delta P?
on that issue with the plug stuck in the line,
Yeah. All right. Let's go on. So at some time during the evening of the 25th of February,
right?
you ascertained that there was an obstruction with a tank inside the pipeline.
Yes.
And were you,
No. At what time?
I'm asking you, at some time,
At some time in the night, we sent the camera down,
yes,
and the camera was obstructed from going further into the line by
A
a silver
tank?
tank.
by, obstructed by a tank?
The camera was obstructed by the tank,
By a tank.
and I wasn't able to move the tank to go in further.
Okay. Were you interested then to find out whether, notwithstanding that obstruction, a diver could have gone into the tank? Could have gone into the pipeline to effect a rescue?
Okay. For a diver to enter the rescue, a proper risk assessment should be conducted before you send someone into the line. Meaning that you need to know the conditions inside the line, you need to know if there's obstructions, if there's hazards, what hazards are in the line. Right? To send someone inside that line without knowing that would be reckless.
Okay, so at some time in the night, you found out that there was an obstruction with a
We
tank.
found out that there was a tank at around the elbow.
Did you all do a risk assessment?
We did not have all the information to do a risk assessment.
What information you want? More cameras to go inside?
We did not know the quantity of oil inside the line. We didn't know the distance the divers are inside.
So,
If you wanted to send a diver down inside, you needed to know a lot more information, right? Because then you put the diver's life at risk.
so this risk assessment would have taken a long time.
The risk assessment,
The risk assessment took a long time, not so?
no, there was no risk
Because
assessment done.
according to your evidence, several efforts were made and crawlers went, boroscope went,
Right.
and,
So-
at the
so-
end of the risk
So
assessment,
let's step it back a bit, because you're going away ahead and you're carrying the conversation away from what really happened. At the time of the incident, LMCS were responsible for executing the emergency rescue plan. They had lost their standby divers and had no one to rescue anybody. Paria is assisting because Paria is not equipped with rescue equipment for diving. So with respect to the supply of boats and barges and calling around for expert advice, stuff like that, Paria is assisting that. So that LMCS can make a proper call with respect to not putting people's life at risk on retrieval of anybody. Putting someone inside that line without knowing the conditions in the line is wanton recklessness.
So according to you, tell me, according to you then, that the risk assessment would have necessitated getting full visual of what was in the line?
Not for the full visual. You can get a risk assessment for a certain section, and that could provide information and you could progress further. I'm not saying that can't be an option.
So
unless you have information to make that first entry safely, then it would be reckless.
Okay, could you assist us to tell us what time you finished, Paria or IMT had completed their risk assessment to make a decision whether they would go into the pipeline?
At that time, LMCS were the ones responsible for coming up the risk assessment.
We will deal with responsibility at some other time. What I'm asking you, Paria was making efforts with diving teams
to explore the option of diving into the line.
And
yes.
According to your statement, they were making efforts to have a rescue attempted. Am I correct?
Correct.
So all that I'm asking you, what time Paria made a risk assessment that they could not go into the pipeline?
The risk assessment, the advice given from different divers, commercial divers, were not advising that it was safe enough to enter the line.
Right.
So,
well, I'm sorry, that's not an answer. I'm sorry, that's not an answer to the question. It is important, isn't it? Did you ever make an assessment of risk that it was too risky to enter into the pipeline?
Okay. The advice given by the people that we spoke to, the expert divers, advised that it was too risky to enter the line.
Right.
So
Is that a yes, then?
So the first,
is that a yes?
So the first, yes, that's yes. The first part of this assessment was advice from experts.
So you adopted what the diving team told, the various diving teams told you?
We were guided by that.
You were guided by that. And around what day and what time that was made, that decision was made? Decision not to send a diver into the pipeline to do the rescue.
Sometime in the after Christopher Boudram was rescued, a decision was made that not to enter the pipeline unless we have more information to ascertain the condition in the line and ascertain that the risks were acceptable to send someone into the pipeline.
I agree, that is what you said, but I'm asking you at what day and time you made the decision not to send someone in the pipeline?
I'm not sure that's an entirely fair question, because I'm assuming, and from what the witness has already said, that they were constantly reviewing whether it was possible to put anyone in the line.
Yes.
And as I understand what you're saying, Mr. Way, is that that review was an ongoing process, which ultimately you decided it was too risky to send anybody in the line.
Because we were advised by expert divers.
No, I understand that, but I mean, we're not interested for the moment in how you arrived at that decision, but you did arrive at the decision that at no point in time were you given sufficient information to allow you to say it was a risk worth taking. That's what it comes to, isn't it?
Correct.
Thank you. And it was an ongoing thing, is what you're telling us.
Right.
The first minute Mr. Boudram comes out the line, it obviously was a very high risk to consider it. Hours later, days later, is a different question, because you'd had more information. That's as I understand it.
Correct.
And there never came a point in time when you, I don't mean you personally, I mean the IMT, were ever able to arrive at a point where you thought the risk was worth taking. That's what you're saying, as I understand it.
Yes.
Right.
I'm not sure I missed it.
No, thank you.
Now, you would have, apart from Mr. Christopher Boudram, who had been in the pipeline, were you aware that Mr. Michael Kurban had gone into the pipeline after Mr. Boudram was rescued?
There were reports, alleged reports. We cannot confirm that he entered the pipeline.
Did you have reports that he entered the pipeline and he went through on the vertical section and the horizontal section?
No confirmed reports. That's alleged. That's what he said.
Well, if you were interested in getting information about the condition in the pipeline, did you make efforts to contact Mr. Boudram to see whether you could get information from him? Sorry, Mr. Kurban. Much obliged, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Kurban?
I did not personally make any communication, Mr. Kurban.
Do you know whether the IMT made any decision to contact him?
I don't know.
Do you know whether the IMT made any efforts to contact him, to get information about the conditions in the pipeline from him?
I don't know. I don't know if it would have been reliable.
Sorry, I didn't catch your answer. I don't know if what?
We don't know if he entered the pipeline. We don't know the...
Well, I think what Mr. Maharaj is asking is, did you ask him?
It was there in the clips on what he did. But all that is... We did not ask I personally did not ask Mr. Boudram. If I know the IMT asked Mr. Boudram, I do not know.
But Mr. Way, I think earlier I heard you indicate that Paria had officials at the site. Were those officials part of the IMT construct in terms of an on-site commando or anyone relaying information back to the IMT?
Yes, we would have someone on the berth itself who would report back into the IMT.
Mr. Way, it is correct, though, that you knew that divers from LMCS were prevented from going into the pipeline to attempt a rescue.
Who advised,
Sorry?
Paria would have advised divers that it's unsafe to enter.
Did Paria take steps to prevent divers from going into the pipeline?
Elaborate on the word prevent.
Really need advice on the word prevent.
Yes.
Did
Okay, let me explain. Prevent could either mean don't go. Prevent could mean, as is alluded in newspaper with Coast Guard, preventing. Paria did not prevent people from entering the pipeline. Had they done that, there would not have been the continued divers diving without past Paria's request to not continue diving because it was unsafe.
After Michael Kurban dived in the pipeline and came out,
Yes?
are you aware of any other diver who went into that pipeline?
We would be aware of divers entering the hyperbaric chamber.
Yeah, I'm not asking about the hyperbaric chamber. Entering the pipeline.
You can't see.
You can't see.
You can't see. The hyperbaric chamber...
You are giving evidence on oath. I'm asking you a question. Are you aware that Paria instructed the Coast Guard not to allow persons to dive into the pipeline?
Paria advised Coast Guard to take control of the site because it was getting what's the word to use? I mean, this uncontrollable.
The question is, I want your answer. Are you aware that Paria instructed the Coast Guard to prevent persons from diving into the pipeline?
Paria requested the Coast Guard to assist. To assist people from not entering the pipeline, but not prevent them.
A little bit semantic, isn't it?
No.
I want to read to you paragraph 109. Mr. Colin Piper is the incident commander, not so?
Yes?
And I want to read a paragraph of his witness statement, and I want you to tell me whether you agree with it. It's paragraph 109 of Mr. Colin Piper's statement, 1365. After discussions between myself and the general manager about apparently volatile situation developing at the scene, he and I agreed that the TTCJ should take control of the site, safeguard Paria Kensan personnel, and take control of the ongoing rescue operations. This would include preventing the LMCS divers from entering the pipeline. Mustak therefore made this request of the TTCJ in my presence. Would you agree with that?
That Colin Piper asked the Coast Guard, which is after discussion between myself and the general manager about the apparently volatile situation developing at the scene, he and I agreed that the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard should take control of the site, safeguard Paria's Kensan personnel, and take control of ongoing rescue operations. This would include preventing the LMCS divers from entering the pipeline. Right? This is Paria making a request to the Coast Guard to take control of the site. And prevent divers from entering the pipeline. That was a request.
Yes. Do you agree with that statement?
I agree that was a request to the Coast Guard.
Do you agree with the statement Mr. Colin Piper made there that you're reading?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what Colin Piper would have read, but I would say I agree with the intent.
Okay. Mr. Way, were you aware that there were divers prepared to go into that pipeline to rescue the men during the time you and Paria officials were looking for video and boroscope and crawler?
I knew there were divers on the site who could have been available to dive.
Into the pipeline?
Whether it was into the pipeline once it was safe to do so.
No, wait. You know that they were willing to dive even without having a risk assessment done?
Yes.
By Paria?
Correct.
Correct. Did you have any discussions with them?
No, I did not have any discussions with the divers.
In order to determine whether it was safe, whether what they told you would have been considered to determine whether it was safe for them to go in?
Neither did they communicate to the IMT.
I'm sorry?
Neither did they communicate to the IMT.
Oh, they didn't communicate with the IMT. I wanted now to go to the scope of works. I do not know whether you consider this might be.
Can I just ask one more question?
Sure.
Before Mr. Maharaj, well, before we have lunch, I think. But were you aware that those who were missing were related to divers who were on the surface and who had worked or were working with LMCS?
Yes, they were.
So father, for example, of one,
yes.
a cousin or I think a brother of another. Were you aware of that?
Yes.
Yeah. And that perhaps relatives would be more likely to take risks to retrieve their own relatives than a stranger? Did that factor in to the risk assessment that you said you were making? Did it factor in?
Yes.
It did. All right. Well, thank you very much. I think what we'll do is we'll take an early lunch today, come back at, shall we say, 10 to 2, with a view to dealing with the first part of this. Thank you very much indeed. Now, can I say this? I would like to try every which way we can to ensure that Mr. Way does not have to return at some stage on the 5th of December. It would be unfair on him. And I think we should do whatever we need to do. If that means sitting on, we will sit on until we've concluded your evidence, Mr. Way, so that you can go and not have to worry about not discussing it with others and so on, all right? Especially as we've got such a long break between now and when we sit again, all right? So,
Okay.
It may mean that you'll sit longer than you might have been told that it was going to finish at 3:30. It might be a bit longer, but I think everyone would be happier if we got it all done with today.
Not a problem at all.
All right, thank you very much. So we'll come back then at 5 to 2, please. We'll call it 5 to 2.
Order hands.